Okay.
Yeah. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar on clinical evaluation. The webinar is structured as follows. So there will be 30 minutes presentation and a 15 minutes Q&A session. So should you have any questions during the presentation, please send them through the box on the right side of your screen. There's a questions section and you can write them down. We'll be answering to them at the end of the webinar. So today, Dan Pereira and Max Wojtoks, senior medical writers at Eclevar, will deep dive into the clinical evaluation topic.
Yes, well, thank you very much for the introduction. So I will start with an introduction to what is a clinical evaluation. So if we have a look into the MDR, you will find the definition. So the clinical evaluation is a systematic and planned process to continuously generate, collect, analyze, and assess clinical data pertaining to the device in order to verify its safety and performance, especially in the clinical benefit of the device when it's used as intended by the manufacturer. As you can see that from the definition, we already have two other expression inside. The one is clinical data. So what are clinical data? These are information concerning the safety or performance that is generated from the use of the device and is sourced, can be sourced from the following: clinical investigations, published scientific literature, the PMS, so the post-market surveillance, and in particular, the post-market clinical follow-up. On the other hand, we have the expression clinical benefit. So what does it mean? So this is the positive impact of a device on the health of an individual expressed in terms of a meaningful, measurable, patient-related clinical outcome, including outcomes related to the diagnosis or the positive impact on a patient management or public health. So the importance of the clinical benefit we will address later in the presentation. If you then have a look further on the MDR, you will find that Article 61 is the most important one about your clinical evaluation. It's also referring to Annex 1, which concludes the general safety and performance requirements. And also another Annex 14 is very important. This Annex 14 describes the steps how to do a clinical evaluation. So going into detail, if you have a look in Article 61, the clinical evaluation is the confirmation of the conformity with the relevant general safety and performance requirements set out, as I said, in Annex 1, under the normal condition of the intended use of the device. It also is the evaluation of undesirable side effects and the acceptability of the benefit-risk ratio based on clinical data, providing sufficient clinical evidence. Here it's important that it's also the MDR requires that the manufacturer shall plan, conduct, and document the clinical evaluation in accordance with this Article 61 and Annex 14. So if we go further in in Article 61, the clinical evaluation should be defined and should follow a defined and methodologically sound procedure. Here, it's important to say that you have to do a relevant scientific literature search, critical evaluation of this data. You have to show that the data you find in equivalent to the intended purpose of your device. And also very important is to show that the data adequately demonstrate compliance with the general safety and performance requirements set out in Annex 1. Yes. Also, very important, you have to do a critical evaluation of the results of all your clinical data, for example, for clinical investigations. And also you should consider available alternative treatment options besides the device you have. Coming to Annex 1, as I said, these are the general safety and performance requirements. Here you can see Chapter 1. These are the general requirements you have to address. For example, we have GSP 1. This is the requirements on the safety and performance. And then it goes on. So I will not go into detail of all of them. But you can see, so you have to demonstrate, you have to implement it, that you have implemented a risk management system. You control the measurable risk, and so on. Then coming to Annex 14, as I said, this is describes the steps how to do a clinical evaluation. The MDR tells you exactly what you have to do. So let me guide you through this. So first of all, you will need to have an establish and update your clinical evaluation plan. You have to do a systematic literature review. Then, of course, you have to appraise all the data concerning the suitability for establishing the safety and performance of your device. Then the next step is sometimes the most difficult. So you have to generate data if you don't have sufficient clinical data. And at the end, you have to, of course, you have to analyze all your clinical data regarding your clinical benefits. Next step is then the MDR tells us that the clinical evaluation should be thorough and objective. So it tells us that we have to include favorable and unfavorable data. So that means if you find a publication which are going in the opposite direction, what you are looking for, you still have to address this in your clinical evaluation, and you cannot just take it out. Also, the depth and the extent shall be proportionate and appropriate to the nature, the classification, the intended purpose, and the risk of your device. Another step could be the demonstration of equivalence. Here, it's important to say that the MDR requires you that you have access to the data. So you have to have access to the technical documentation of your competitor, which is quite difficult. And the last point, of course, is that you have to document all your results in a clinical evaluation report, or in short, CER. This following graph will tell you how this clinical evaluation is performed throughout the life cycle of the medical device. So at the beginning, we have the CP, so this is like the scoping. Then we have the clinical evaluation report. And then the results of this report will then affect your PMS or the PMCF activities. And the results of these PMCF activities would then may have impact on your technical file. So it could be that the results need you to update your risk management, your instruction for use, or the usability engineering file. And then the circle starts again. Here it's important to consider that the clinical evaluation, as I said before, it's not only one document, but it's rather like a process. And as you can see, the clinical evaluation will have an impact on a very large variety of different documents. On the left side, the ones I showed before, but here may be also important to mention that depending on your class device, there's the periodic safety update report or the summary of safety and clinical performance. So now coming to the structure of the clinical evaluation, which is the most important step, how to do it. Here I would like to highlight that the clinical evaluation is based on 5 stages. So the first, stage 0 is the CP. So this defines the scoping and planning of your clinical evaluation. Then in the next step, you will have the identification of your data. And then of this follows the stage 3. This is the appraisal of your data. Then you will have the analysis. And then at the end, you will, as I mentioned before, you will have the CR, the PMS plan, or your PMCF activities. So now coming to the structure, here maybe to mention it's very helpful to use the MDC guideline 2013, which is an assessment report template, so you can see what the reviewer will look at the notified body. So they have a list, a checklist, what they will check your documents for. So let me go through this. So first of all, you have to, of course, you have to say who's the manufacturer, what is your device. You can give a clinical evaluation report reference. Then you have to say, okay, what type of assessment it is. It can be a new assessment or like a recertification. The next big step chapter then would be the overview of your medical device. This includes all the data you find normally also in your instruction for use. So this includes the device description, classification, and so on. The next important step, of course, as I said before, this is the clinical evaluation plan, including in your intended purpose, clinical benefits, and so on. You have to describe which common specification and harmonized standard you will apply. And if you would like to demonstrate equivalence, but as I mentioned before, you have to have access to the data. So you have to show that you have access. So the next big chapter is then the state of the art. For the state of the art, you have to describe the clinical context. So you have to identify the medical fields, which is concerning for your medical device. You have to describe it. And also you have to describe the different stages and severities of your conditions for the medical indication. So, and also the last point here is that you have to provide data for the frequency in the general population. So these data normally you can find in systematic reviews, but also you could get it from reimbursement institutes, for example. For the state of the art, it is required to have a summary and justification of your literature search. So you have to say, okay, what kind of question I had, what are my search terms, what are my inclusion and exclusion criteria, my control measures, and so what type of literature I found. Following this, you can also do literature search on similar benchmark devices. Also, you have to describe available treatment options, so other available treatment options besides your device. And the next point is also very important, to have a description of an indicative list and specification of parameters based on the state of the art in the medicine for the acceptability of your benefit and risk ratio. So that means that if you find different complication rates in the literature, so you have to keep this and then later compare to your own device. And one, maybe in case it's a novel product, you have to say it's a novelty or not. So the next step then would be to do also literature search on clinical data for your device. This is quite similar to the state of the art. So you have to provide a summary and justification of your literature search. So this includes a search documentation. Here we have the search protocol, a report, how you want to appraise the data. You have to provide a full article list. Also, you have to provide a list which includes all the excluded articles and the reason for exclusion. And in line also with the state of the art, you always have to provide a full text copy, so a PDF of all articles you have included. So here is an example how you can address this search protocol. So you could use this as an example, like a table. Here on the left side, on the upper left side, you will have then the type of search, and then it goes on with the search period, so the start and the end, and what kind of filters you apply for your articles. So for example, meta-analysis, systematic reviews, the species, of course, human, and the language, so you can use English or other English you can speak, and you understand the publications. Next then would be to say, which search engine I use, so PubMed, for example, and then the question, what I'm looking for, and concerning the question, your specific search. Next step is the data appraisal. So how can you address this? You can create like your data contribution criteria, and then use a grading system. For example, here you could use the data source. You can say, is the design of the study appropriate? And then you can say yes or no. For example, also you could use the follow-up time. You can see, this is sufficient for my device or not. And then based on the grading system, you can give justification if you want to, if you will then include the article or not. As I mentioned also before, you have to provide an exclusion list, and based on the inclusion list, you can use, for example, different codes for exclusion reasons. Here maybe, for example, you could use the code NE. This stands for not equivalent. So this might be a different device and different medical indication, or treated population. So it could be that the paper is talking about children, but your device is actually intended for adults, so it will not fit. Also, maybe another example would be T. This stands for the type of application. Sometimes you only have an abstract available. Maybe it's only a poster or conference talk. This is an example how you could address the literature search report. So as you can see here, we're using a flow diagram. At the beginning, at the top, we have we have the we have the identification start. So you can see how many papers we found in the beginning. Then we do the first article search, the article screening for the title and abstract. And then you will say, okay, how many I have excluded. Then you will do the same for your full text. And most importantly, at the end, you will say, okay, how many included. So the next step then would be to focus on the PMS data. So what does it include? So these include the complaint data, your cell data, also probably maybe if you had corrective or preventive actions, so in short CAPA. Also very important is to do public safety database search. For example, now in France, it's going to ANSMB, or in Germany it's the BfArM, but this will change as soon as we have the Eulermed 40 available. The next step is then to focus on clinical data generated had by the manufacturer. So what does it mean? This could be pre-market clinical study, clinical investigations, biologic evaluation reports for your device. Also important is here to mention PMCF activities you may have done in the past. Yeah, of course, from them, of course, the PMCF report and PMS report. Very important here is, even if you have all the data, you still have to identify if there are still unanswered questions regarding your medical device. And then you have to address how you want to focus on these unanswered questions in your PMS or PMCF to follow them to address it in the next clinical evaluation. The next step then is the benefit risk analysis. Here it's very important to identify the consistency or discrepancies between your clinical data, the information materials supplied by the manufacturer, and the risk management. So how can you address this? Here, for example, a table. So you can see on the left side, you can list all the complications you found in the literature. Then you can say, okay, does my IFU, so my instruction for use, cover these complications, yes or no? And then you will also have a look into your risk management and to see if this complication is covered or not. And based on the results, of course, you have to do a discussion and see how you can address if something is not addressed in the documentation. The next part is then quite similar. This is then focusing on the clinical benefits. So you have to say, okay, which are my clinical claims, my clinical benefits? You could use, for example, a kind of this table. You can say, okay, what is the type of the claim? It's a performance or safety claim. Then you can say, okay, yes, I have data to support my claim. And in the best case, of course, it's yes. And then in the next step, you can say, okay, what is the source of the clinical evidence? You could have references from the state-of-the-art search. But also you can say, okay, I did a PMCF, so I have clinical evidence by my own. So now I would like to come back to Annex 1. So you also have to address this in your clinical evaluation. What might be helpful, also have a table for this. To keep in mind, these are only the general requirements, so you have to check for the other chapters. So you have to say, okay, it's applicable to my device. Then you have to say, okay, I have evidence of conformity to support this. And then, of course, you have to say, okay, where can I find this in my report or in my technical documentation? And in case this is not applicable to your device, you have to give justification. Yes, and with this, I would like to give forward to Don.
Hello, everyone. So what manufacturer needs to do? So before you start a CER, if you're a CRO, you tend to send a checklist to people, and with this checklist, you get to see what if it's a medical device company, what documents they have, so you can start your CER and then do a gap assessment. If you're a medical device company, on the other hand, you might do your own checklist before you do a gap assessment to see what documents you may have or what documents you're missing as well. It just makes it a lot easier before you start the process and before you start looking into your claims. Now, the claims are really important. You need to identify them before you start the CER, as Max has said. So according to Article 7, 2017, 745, those claims have to be truthful, and you have to have data that supports those claims, whether being performance or any other aspects. Legacy devices, the MDR gives a definition, not a hard definition, but a definition, and it's considered to include all devices previously CE marked under the European Medical Device Directive or Active Implantable Medical Device Directive. New data may be needed to be generated prior to CE marking under the MDR. And this can be post-market data, including PMCF, or demonstration of equivalence. Sufficient clinical evidence, following MDR Article 6110. There should be sufficient clinical evidence to confirm safety, performance, and acceptability of the benefit risk determination. As Max has said, in relation to the state of the art for the legacy devices prior to CE marking under the MDR. Other evidence, such as preclinical testing, is used for confirmation of safety performance. PMCF studies may be undertaken to confirm these conclusions. So yeah, you need sufficient clinical evidence, and that needs to be supported entirely by your clinical data or your PMCF studies. We will discuss PMCF studies and PMCF in future webinars because we plan to do more next year, actually. Lack of clinical data. So this is like a big question, I suppose, when it comes to CERs. There are issues where companies that I have worked with have had lack of clinical data. Then you have to look at other aspects. Sometimes devices may be too new, or there could be just not enough data to support their claims. Again, you always come back to the claims and you need to support those claims. If there is a lack of sufficient supported clinical evidence with regard to declared intended purposes, including the indications and claims as appropriate, manufacturers have to narrow down the intended purpose of the device under evaluation. So yeah, that's good to bear in mind. So working with a CRO, what do you get? You get all our knowledge base, understanding of regulations globally, guidance and support through documentation, and transparency. So we will work with you, we will support you, and we will help you as much as we can. Yeah, and these are the links, and I'm going to pass it back to Marie because I think it's Q&A session now.
Yes, thanks, Man and Don, for the presentations. So we received several questions during the webinar. The first one we received is the MDR saying that a clinical evaluation report should be signed by a clinician or a professional?
I mean, it should be, it has to be signed by a professional. Their CV has to obviously have all the relative information, and then it has to back the document you're writing, right? So yes, of course, it can be a professional, it can be a clinician, maybe a clinician to review a CER is more than adequate. What do you think, Max?
Yes, so yeah. You have, as you said, like you have to add the CV of the medical writer. So best would be to have someone with experience. So it can also be a junior medical writer, but then at least the review should have been done from a senior medical writer, or it could be, I mean, if you have an expert in the field of your device, this could be also very helpful. Yes.
Okay, so we had another question. It's how often do I need to update the clinical evaluation?
Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, so according to section 61, you need to update it through its entire product life cycle. And as a general rule for class 3 devices and implants, clinical data should be obtained from clinical investigations, and the MDR allows exemptions, but there's no exemptions for active implantable medical devices.
Thanks. So we had another question. I still have a MDD certificate. Do I already need to start with PMCF activities?
So
yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so you want to answer?
No, I don't mind.
Okay. So the question was, if you have an MDD certificate, if you still have to start PMCF activities, right? So actually, yes, you have to do. So it's stating in Article 10 of the MDR. So even if you have an MDD certificate, you have to have now a PMS, and which includes PMCF activities. So also this would be good for you to start already, because latest in 2024 you have to have data available. So yeah, so you have to start doing it now. Yeah. So this is actually a requirement already.
Okay, thank you. We had also, so is the CER supposed to answer all the GSPR or only 1 in 8, which cover safety, performance, and benefit risk?
Yeah, so maybe I answered because I was talking about, so you have to address all of them, so 1 to 8. As I said, it's only chapter 1, so you have to go through Annex 1. There's all different chapters, which may also you have to apply, and if it's not applicable to your device, you have to give a justification of why it's not applicable. So maybe you don't use radiation, so you don't have to address this point, for example. But yes, you have to address all of them.
Okay, thank you. Another one we received is, can you explain more about legacy device?
Yeah, so as I stated in my slides, the definition of a legacy device is wait, I'm just going to show you. Yeah, it's considered to include all devices previously CE marked under the European Medical Device Directive or active implantable medical devices directive.
Okay. Another question is, what is sufficient clinical evidence?
Yeah, so sufficient clinical evidence is anything that really proves the performance and safety outcomes of your CER. It should back up the claims you make initially when you conduct your CER. So when you do your searches when you do your appraisal, your methodology, even the manufacturer's claims, it should all be backed up.
Okay, thank you. We also received a question that is, do I need to generate new data before CE marking under the MDR?
Again, so again, please, the question.
Sorry. Do I need to generate new data before CE marking under the MDR?
Yeah, so maybe I can comment on this. So in case, so this really depends on your clinical benefits, so the claims you're stating. So if you did not start yet with the PMCF activity, support the clinical data, yes, unfortunately, you have to generate new data. Because it's even in the, so there's a guideline, MDC guideline 2026. It's saying that you should not just start after the submission. So yes, you might need to generate prior to CE marking, but this really depends on your clinic benefits and of your class, the device classification. Yes.
Thank you, Max. So someone wanted to know, are the PMCF activities mandatory at each CER update?
Yes. So, okay, I mean, I can answer. So yes, so the PMCF activity, as I said, this is it's required, it's mandatory now to do PMCF. So, and the PMCF data are used to update your clinical evaluation, so you always have to do it. So it's like a continuous process throughout the life cycle of the medical device.
Thank you. So a question that we received is, do we need to update SOA section every year? And how much duration is sufficient for SOA search?
Oh, the state of the art section. Well, yeah, you have to be aware of the current state of the art. I mean, as a company anyway. So, you know, the CER should be updated depending on the PMCF. So if you do your searches and check on a yearly basis anyway, and if there are any updates, then yeah, you have to update it.
Thank you. Another question is, can articles 61.10 be applied for all class devices?
Yeah, so you want me to answer? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Article 61 is, yeah, well, you can use it if it's not deemed appropriate to have like a study, but this is it cannot be applied to class 3 devices or implantable devices.
Implantables, yeah.
Yes, so there might be exceptional cases applied for other classification, but this really you have to address this with your notified body. Yeah.
Okay, so another question, which is more related to what you do as medical writers. So as a CRO, what activities could you perform for manufacturers?
Anything. Well, not anything, but anything the client wants. Obviously, CERs, you know, we do clinical trials as well, don't we? We can do publications. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the client wants. We work on the MDR, but we also have got IVDR knowledge. So, you know, we have got the knowledge base to do most the client wants at a reasonable level, I'd say. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we can have like 2 more questions. So another question that we had is, what are pre-market sources of clinical data?
So pre-market sources are like clinical investigation reports of the devices, which, you know, and clinical investigation reports on other studies reported in scientific literature, reports published in peer-reviewed scientific literature, stuff like this.
Thank you. The last question that we have is, state-of-the-art search and safety performance have to be separately performed, or is it okay to perform state-of-the-art search separately and then combine results in literature review reports?
You can do the state-of-the-art separately. I mean, it should all be encompassed in the CR anyway, right? So it's up to you if you want to do both documents separately, but in the end, it should all be in one document.
Okay, so thank you, Don. Thank you, Max. So should you have any questions, you can send us an email here on clientcare at eclevar.com. We'll be pleased to answer to your questions should you have more that pop up after this webinar. We'll be also sending you a PDF of the presentation for if you want to receive it. So feel free to send us an email. Thank you for your time. Thanks again, Max and Dan, for your participation in this webinar. And we wish you all a great day or a great evening for those who are on the other side of the world.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a great
you.
Take care. Bye.
week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.